All right, this is one you might remember from Algebra 2, but this is powers of the imaginary unit. Again, you can always find more videos over here along the side. Here's Khan's video of it. And I'm going to give you my version instead. All right, so here we go. First thing I'm going to have you do is just Google powers of I. And then let's look for an image that'll help us sort through this mess. All right, this is a pretty good one right here. I like how it has I to the 0. Notice how I to the 0 is the same thing as I to the 4th. All right, let's look back. All right, so I to the 7th. What is I to the 7th? Well, if we remember, I is the same thing as the square root of -1. If we want to know what I squared is, that'd be like 2 of those things, right? So what happens is we end up with the square root of a number times the square root of the same number. The square root goes away. So I squared is -1. And we do that same sort of pattern as we keep adding things onto it. I to the 3rd is the same thing as I squared times another I. And we're left with -I. And we do it one more time, I to the 4th. Well, that's the same thing as like I squared times I squared. That's the same thing. So I squared is -1. What happens if I take -1 times itself? I end up with 1. And then the cycle continues as we see here, right? I to the 0 is 1, I to the 1st is I, and then if we keep going, if we wanted to know what I to the 5th was, it would start right back here at I to the 1st. It would be the same thing. The cycle will just continue. All right, so let's take a look. I to the 7th. How long is the cycle? Well, every cycle in this is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? If we look at another image here, we could see down in this picture here, we notice it's the same thing. This is off. It should say 1. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Notice this is the same thing as I to the 1st, it should say. It's the same thing as I to the 9th. It repeats every 4. So what we're going to do is we're going to figure out, okay, 7 things, I to the 7th. We can start it by taking it divided by 4. If I type it in a calculator, I get 1.75. That tells me there's one full cycle and then 0.75 of a cycle remaining. So that's the same thing as 3/4. The key word or the key number here is 3. 3 out of 4. So if I go back here and if I look at our original picture, I said we want to look at I to the 3rd, since there was 3 different leftover parts left to the cycle. So our answer is going to be I to the 3rd. It's the same thing as I to the 7th, which is -I. Okay, let's do another one. I to the 26th. Let's use the same method. 26 divided by 4. That would spit out 6.5. Now remember, 0.5 is what we're looking at, not the 6. 0.5 is the same thing as a half. Or a half is the same thing as 2/4. So what we want to do is look back at our chart. I squared is what we want since there was 2 left over. So our answer is same thing as I squared, which is -1. And that's how we do the powers of I.